Hi, I'm Steve Smith, and welcome to Finding Emmaus. As we discussed in the past, the story of the road to Emmaus concerns two men distraught over the death of Jesus, who find themselves in deep conversations with a stranger on the way to Emmaus. But they only find out later that the man they were talking to was actually Jesus. It's a powerful tale filled with lessons about hope, discernment, and the truth. But it also might help us to realize the many encounters that we've had with Christ through the actions of people we encounter, sometimes in our darkest hours. These encounters at times radically change the choices that we make. Perhaps one area of society that helps to create some of our best times in our darkest moments is that of alcohol, drugs, and other addictions. Quite literally, celebrities from A to Z often publicly live their struggles with addictions in the limelight of Hollywood. But lost on most of us are those who have lived their lives cloaked from the limelight, attempting to deal with the very real burdens of providing for their families. Those who might be struggling at work, struggling with depression or anxiety, or maybe the loss of a loved one. And the experience is somewhat similar to our interview with Nick Cory. Nick is first and foremost the father of 4 children and the husband of his loving wife, Kelly. Nick grew up in a strong Catholic home and attended both Catholic and public schools, eventually graduating from Oak Hills High School on the west side of Cincinnati. In high school, he developed a love for English and wrestling, and these two passions provided his entree to Mount St. Joseph University, and he became a 3-year captain on the wrestling team and the first individual athlete in Mount St. Joe's history to qualify for the national tournament all 4 years of competing. Upon graduation, Nick went on to begin a 20-year career as an English teacher in both public and Catholic schools. However, like his father and brother before him, he had the urge to move into education administration. Now, from the outside looking in, Nick had everything: an incredible supporting family, a nice home in the suburbs of Cincinnati, the respect of his peers, and many students, neighbors, friends that really cared about him. But with his move to education administration, well, that also began his struggle.
I think I was hired in July of 2016. It was again, I want to say this, I did enjoy teaching, but I was just kind of ready for that leap. And you know, again, getting into administration was just one of those things that I'd always had in my mind as part of my career. My dad had been a principal. My brother is a principal right now. And so it was definitely something that was not foreign to my family, getting into education administration. Unfortunately, once I was in it, I started struggling. There's really no other way to put it. And give a little bit of background. You know, I used to hear the phrases anxiety attack, you know, and or panic attack or anxiety, or, you know, and I'm not proud of this, but you know, a lot of times I know now I'd kind of roll my eyes a little bit on the inside, like, you know, if I didn't see a crutch or a cast on a broken arm, you know, I sometimes wondered if I was dealing with a hypochondriac, you know. In my mind, I would wonder, like, you know, what type of, you know, panic attack, or anxiety, or you know, and but I gotta confess, I sometimes wondered quite, you know, are they being hypochondriacs? Are they being, until it happened to me, you know. I'm in this new career. I'm all proud of it. Got my own office, got my name outside the door, all these, you know, kind of trappings that kind of puff you up a little bit. And then, you know, the reality and the stresses of the job started to get to me. I know now that a big thing that I lacked was humility, because had I not been so, you know, puffy in my own, you know, I probably would have been able, it probably would not have been too embarrassing to go to my bosses and say, this is embarrassing. I wish this wasn't the case. I know you guys invested in me and thought that I was the right guy, when you hired me, some months back, but I'm really struggling right now, and I don't know what it is. I'm sure it was stress from the job induced, but why are a lot of people able to deal with that and I wasn't? And I didn't like admitting that. And so it's just focus more in my mind, right? I'm like, just hunker down, hammer down, focus. And it wasn't getting any better. And, there's so many details I can go into, but for time's sake, I will just say that, I found that vodka made a lot of that anxiety and stress go away. Okay. I didn't even know it was anxiety that I was dealing with. Remember, I didn't know if that was really a thing. I thought people used it a lot. But I found that vodka made it go away. It got out of hand. And to the point where it was so bad. If you're drinking in the morning, right, there's a problem, a bad problem, obviously. I didn't deal with stocks and bonds or profit margin. I dealt with people's children. I dealt with people's kids. And it's hard to admit this. It's hard to even as it comes out of my mouth right now, Steve, I'm 4 years removed from it, and it's hard to think about, but I would drink in the morning. I would wake up, I'd be overwhelmed with a lot of things going on in my position. I'm wondering if I'm doing a good job. I knew I'd dropped the ball on a couple things professionally. I'd always been able to kind of juggle the balls like we all have to do in our job. And now for the first time in my professional career, I was dropping some of those balls, and I'd wake up, and it was like a physical feeling of what I know now was anxiety and panic attacks, and vodka made it go away. And then you start, now you're paranoid, like, man, is anybody smelling this on me, at work? And then, there were other things I tried, and it got dark, and to the point where, so bad where, my wife and I are arguing, right? And she's like, you need to do something. And I'm saying, what do you mean? I just got this job. I can't just, rehab and getting help and all that had come up. And I'm thinking, no way. And, eventually enough stuff, enough embarrassing stuff happened to where I couldn't deny it. And I said, okay, I'll get help.
So now, Nick, you've been through an awful lot during that year, and you've come to the decision with your beautiful wife and your kids that you really need help. And you're going to find help down in Florida, but you're going to be gone for 2 months. You're going to have limited contact with them. You're not going to have any technology. Tell us what was going through your mind during that time.
Yeah, first off, there was a lot of embarrassment, again, that's, how much you're embarrassed is probably directly proportional to how much pride you got in you, right? And this was really humiliating for me, particularly for me, because I was, when you're kind of full of yourself, a fall like that is, it was tough. And, not just for the obvious reasons, but just, it's tough seeing your kids go through this, but that's going to be tough for any father. It's tough seeing, knowing your wife has to deal with all this. But, I had a pretty high estimation of myself. And so when this happened, I'm like, man, and, but and you read, it happens. It can happen to anyone, or it's in every family, or and you intellectually, all that. It was in my family quite a bit, so it should not have been shocking that I fell to it as well. But it was me, and so you get down there and you're still, I'm saying the word to myself. I remember being in the plane on the way down there. I'm like, I'm going to rehab. Like, rehab is for losers, and I'm not proud of that, but it's just a reality. Like, in your mind, you're thinking, rehab, and then I get there, and it wasn't just for, it was for everything. I saw people coming in who were heroin was their thing, and coke, and just there were a lot of people who you think of stereotypically that were there, just being honest, but there were also, there was a banker there, there was a lawyer there, there was a guy who played for the Pittsburgh Steelers and just got hooked on pain meds. It's a reality. It helped me because it made me feel like there were a couple things that helped me. Seeing people who were somewhat like me kind of let me know it softened things a little bit, but then also I knew I couldn't just go down there and not tell. So I made a Facebook post, and I didn't go into every other ugly detail, but this was on December 27, 2016. I said, listen, I've been sweating on making this post. I was real brave. I waited till like an hour before I left for rehab, and I put it up there, and then I got out of town. But for a couple weeks, I was thinking, like, once I knew I was going to rehab, I'm like, man, how am I? And I found, so I just said, the only reason I'm making this post is I don't want people to think I'm not calling you back, or I'm not texting you back, or that I'm ignoring you. Here's what's going on. And again, I didn't go into this big detailed thing, but I said, I've been struggling, and again, nothing you plan for, but I've been struggling, and my family needs me to go down to rehab, and I need it too, and I know it. And I remember I said, I appreciate your prayers, and I appreciate, any prayers you'll say for my wife and kids, and maybe if there's anybody else struggling, hopefully this will give you a nudge to, because it was the hardest thing to hit send. You know what I mean? Like, I'm telling the world what's up, I have former students that are Facebook friends, and I you think of everything. You shouldn't. You should just think of what you need to do. But, I'm not that pure. I'm not that, what other people think was a big deal to me, which was one of my problems. But I hit send, and I went to the airport, and that was tough. That's another story altogether. Just leaving my wife and my wife and kids at the airport was tough. And but I get to Florida, and there's this guy from the clinic there to pick me up, and I knew I was giving up my cell phone for 2 months, which was like, whoa, and I did. I got on, I checked text messages real quick, and I checked Facebook, and I had about 400 responses. And there, and you can comment publicly, right, where everyone can see, or you can send someone a private message. And everything was very encouraging, which was a good lift for where I was at the time. But I will tell you, all the public, some of the private messages helped a lot too, because there were a few of these. Hey Nick, me too. 4 years ago, I was like, what? Like, they have a gorgeous house and a great, like, he's got everything together. Like, he went to rehab, or Nick, I'm so happy I showed this. There was someone who shared about his daughter who was struggling real bad, and he was going to show my Facebook post to her to, talk her. It's a little embarrassing, but it was a needed, like you're not, get over yourself. You're not so unique. This truly does happen to a ton of people, and it didn't make the whole situation easier, obviously, but it did. It was just from the one standpoint, it just felt good seeing 400 people giving you, and you know, wishing you the best. But then the private messages, you know, from the people who didn't want it out there for everyone, but letting me know, Nick, it's in our family too. One guy said, call me when you get back, because I've been through, you know, it helped me. It helped make you realize that you're not unique. There's a ton of people in it. Yeah.
Now you've returned from Florida. You were down there for 2 months. Unfortunately, you didn't have a lot of access to your wife and your kids during that time. You didn't have access to technology. Tell us about your experience in trying to find employment when you've returned from Florida.
So I'd always been pretty successful in jobs I chased, you know. Right out of college, the first school I went to was a pretty highly targeted school, pretty desired teaching job, and I got it. You know, and then when I decided to move on and go to another school for certain reasons, we were living up near I applied and I got that. And then when I decided to switch again, a couple years later, and then I ended up staying 14 years. I was actually in Cincinnati. And the other thing was for 14 years, but when I went there, you know, I got so again, feeding my ego perhaps was like, you know, this job thing is no, you know, I understand. I must get interviews, or I must, you know, because I do so well, you know. Again, probably some arrogance in there, but it was just a fact that, you know, the jobs that I chased, I'd pretty much gotten, and then I came back, and you know, you're faced with, you know, how much do I tell, you know, in the interview, and you know, I kind of accepted that a lot of people are going to find out anyway, and I didn't want it to be out of left field, like, so in the interviews I was transparent, and I said, you know, I had some struggles, and I went to rehab, and you know, here's what happened, and you know, you try to use it as strength. I'm just being honest. I would even say, you know, that, or I'm sorry, I'm never going to be that teacher who I understand some of the things that these kids are going through with their parents, because I was in it, you know, a few months ago. You know, almost, you know, trying. You know, maybe I was desperate, but trying to almost use that as a strength, right? Like, I hated that it happened, but I'm going to use it in my teaching career, you know, or in my administration career. When I'm sitting across the desk from a kid who's been caught drinking, or whose parents are having these addictions and whatnot, I'm going to be able to, I think, get it, you know, a little more than maybe a lot of people who haven't gone through it. And everyone, and you're also praying that maybe, you know, all these interviews anymore are panel interviews. Rarely are you interviewing with, never are you interviewing with just one person, you know. It's and I remember leaving sometimes like, maybe there's someone there who's like, you know what, I wish Uncle Paul would have gone to rehab like this guy did, you know, and you know, maybe someone will be empathetic, sympathetic, whatever, because it is so common. And yeah, so I did get called back for a couple interviews, which is always a good sign, but ultimately I was not the choice of the various districts that I went for jobs in. And you know, so that was pretty humbling, and you know, and depressing, to be quite honest with you, and now injecting some anxiety, which I've already proven in the past I didn't deal with well. Now rehab does, you know, it does install some tools for you to, you know, because for you to deal with it, so that you don't revert back to your old ways, you know. And so I tried, you know, but pretty soon, eventually, you get so down that you know, you get rejection after rejection. I started drinking again. I relapsed. Now keep in mind, in my mind, I'm sorry, I'm like, how can you how can you left your family for 2 months, you lost your career, you lost, and look at you, look, you're doing it again, and that's one of the things about addiction. Your brain can absolutely know that this is wrong, but I'm doing it anyway, because the fog of oblivion, right, was preferable to my reality, and that's bad, right? That's bad, but it's just it's what I did. I chose to start drinking again, and things went down quickly again, and it just gets dark, and now your wife is like, your family's like, gosh, he's been to rehab, he's and look at him again, and there was an incident that was pretty defining. It is defining now for me. It was another day of me feeling sorry for myself, right, as I contemplated my last rejection, and I got pretty drunk, middle of the day, my wife's working, my son came home, and he was able to get a ride to work. I can't remember all the details, but he needed a ride home later in the day, and I was drunk, and he's like, Dad, I need a ride home, and again, I preface a lot of things that I say with, I'm not proud of this, but this is another one of those times, right? I'm not proud of this, but I got behind the wheel, and I drove down there drunk. I was drunk at 8 o'clock at night, and our normal tradition was I would pull in, I'd text him I'm here, and then he would come out. Well, I pulled in, by the grace of God, I made it down there, and I pulled in, and that's the last thing I remember. I put the thing, again, by the grace of God, I put the car in park. I passed out. I passed out in my son's work in the driver's seat of my car. So I never texted him saying I'm here. He's waiting, and all of a sudden there's this knock on my window, and it roused me, right? And I look out, and there's my son. And he said, Dad, I've been calling you. And then he saw what was up, and I said, mumbled whatever. But I remember, and it's weird because I shouldn't remember a lot of these things because I was drunk. But I remember telling him to get in, and I remember him saying no. And now I'm sobering up, so like, he didn't defy his parents. He didn't, he's a good kid, and he's 20 now, and that's beginning to, the little not tensions, but just the natural growing up of a kid is happening. So he doesn't agree with everything, and but he's still very obedient, very respectful kid. But at 16, which is what he was then, when I said something, he did it. And he said no. And I said, what do you mean? I said, and he said, for the second time, no. And I looked at him, and again, I shouldn't remember this because I was drunk, but I remember his face. His face was just, it was just, it kind of hit me like, how much damage, how much carnage does there have to be? How much stuff do I got to inflict on this kid and this family before I shake myself, before I cut this stuff out? And it happened right there in the parking lot of his work. And I probably mumbled something, but I got out. I just saw his face, and I just saw, it was Steve, it was life-changing, as it has turned out, because, you know, I got out, I got in the passenger seat, he drove home, you know, I don't know if it was later that night or the next day, but, you know, after I'm sobered up, it just hit me like, I can't keep doing this to this kid, to these kids, to this, you know. And, you know, how his face was, you know, it was, you know, it was burned in my mind. And that's the last, I said no more. And I'm not arrogant enough anymore to think that I can't follow in a second. All right. But it did take that to make me get real serious. And so December 3rd, 2017, that was that date. It's the last time that, you know, that's my sobriety date. And, you know, it's a new life. You know, there's a difference between abstaining and white knuckling it, you know, and sobriety, you know. And I realized that right after rehab, I was just kind of abstaining. You know, first of all, you're in the afterglow of rehab, and, you know, but then because I failed to do certain practices and certain disciplines, I was primed for a relapse when things got tough. Well, life's going to get tough, right? All the time. And I wasn't ready for the rejections that I was getting. And anyway, that, you know, we saw what happened, you know, by God's grace, you know, I mean that, by God's grace, I got, you know, my family is, you know, people have left their spouse for lesser things, you know. And my wife has, you know, she's still here, maybe by a string, but yeah, no. So, you know, my, and here's what's crazy is life's not always easier. You know, you kind of envision, once I'm sober, like for real sober, life will get so much, and it does get better in a lot of ways, but it's also, there's still, you know, consequences are real, right? There's still some stuff that, there are still struggles that are directly a result of me not being in education anymore, not having that job anymore. I am employed again, and it's a good job, but there's a lot of adjustments that you have to make, that are all part of the consequences of you know, what happened, of what I did. Imagine all the tears my wife cried, my kids, you know, and if all that happened, and I didn't, you know, a lot of things are worth it, for lack of a better way of putting it, if you come out as a better human being, right? So I'm in a better place. I kind of balk at saying I'm a better person, because I got 4 kids here and a wife that'll jump in and say, hey, I'll say, hold on a second, you know. But I do think, you know, I get that I was humbled. I was really, really humbled, you know. And you know, Fulton Sheen wrote, I started reading a lot more good stuff, you know, just helps me, you know. And I think it was Fulton Sheen who said, you know, I like little phrases, and he said, sometimes God has to break one's heart to get into it, you know. And I was like, man, you know, sometimes the only time we're finally ready to say, okay, you take charge, is when we've done it our way, and time after time after time after time, it's a failure. and you know, I was finally ready to, you know, say, okay, you take this, because I've made a train wreck out of my life relying on me. And so I think I know I'm better equipped to deal with a lot of things than I was. If I'm a better person, I hope I become, I think I'm on that trajectory. All right. But, again, I want to hold off saying that I am a better person. I think it'd be a waste if I don't become a better person as a result of everything that I went through.
Thanks for taking a few minutes out of your day to listen to Nick's story, and we hope to bring you many more such stories in the future. So we'll leave you today with Nick's most reflective response when I asked if he thought his son's refusal to get in the car was somehow God working through Aiden to help make the change that Nick so desperately needed to make. We also hope Nick's experience helped all of us see how God is working through other people in our lives. Enjoy the journey.
Yeah, you put it that way, and it starts getting hard for me to talk again. I still know God was part of it, and I think you do too. Aiden was God's worker in the vineyard that day, and Aiden accepted the mission. That's got to be hard for a kid who is always obedient, and who, when I say do this, he would do it, and when I said, didn't mean he always liked it, go clean your room, okay, but he'd go clean, but when I said, hop in, and he said no, and literally, I can't think of any other time in his life where he defied me, honestly. Outside, no, been a couple times since then, but again, he's 20 now, right? Those things happen. And they should, in one sense, right? That the whole, he's growing up and he's questioning, stuff, and I think it's a normal, healthy part of growing up that maybe sometimes us parents aren't crazy about, but it's just normal, right? But at 16, he was still, there's still some kid in you at 16, and he still played the role dutifully, and I mean that respectfully to Aiden. He played that role dutifully and obediently, like good sons do. And that day he said no, and it proved to be, yeah.